For most Ontarians, access to a clean, modern, and reliable source of electricity is taken for granted. People do not worry about losing food to spoilage from hydro outages or being unable to cook a meal on their stove. Why are those of us who live in remote First Nations communities not afforded this same privilege? Seniors, medical patients, and people on dialysis who need reliable power for healthcare should never have the fear of being evacuated from their community due to power outages. Unfortunately, this situation is a recurring reality in First Nations communities. For the rest of Ontario, economic development projects are never put on hold due to a lack of electricity. Homes are never built and then not lived in because they cannot be connected to electricity. Most Ontario residents never have to think of or worry about things like power shifting, load restrictions, and diesel costs, which are a constant concern for First Nations communities. The majority of Ontario residents rarely, if ever, have to contend with these conditions. So why do you? The Wataynikaneyap Power Project was developed by a mandate from Chiefs and First Nations leadership to connect remote First Nations communities currently serviced by diesel generation to the provincial power grid.
It initially started with the Central Corridor Energy group communities, which were about 10 communities that were involved initially, but then now it's gone up to 18 communities.
Musselwhite Mine realized that they needed additional power to continue production. And they went to the First Nation partners under the Musselwhite Agreement to talk to the First Nations, realizing they were looking at grid connection for their communities. And that was a long-standing discussion right from the planning stages of the mine site. So they approached the First Nations to look at a relationship and developing a transmission line.
Together, these 18 communities form a First Nations holding company. Wataynikaneyap Power is owned through a shareholders agreement with the First Nations holding company owning 50% and Goldcorp owning the other 50%.
Right now, the structure is that each community owns one share and one vote in terms of the shareholders. First Nations holding company board members are the ones that protect the interests of the First Nation communities.
As part of the shareholders agreement, Goldcorp will exit as a partner once certain conditions have been met. Since Goldcorp's role is temporary, Wataynikaneyap Power intends to partner with an established, experienced electrical transmission company with the eventual goal of 100% First Nations ownership.
Goldcorp is a mining company. It's not a transmission company. So they're not looking for ownership long-term in this project. However, we realize the importance to the First Nations on owning this transmission line. So we're willing to work with them, and actually it's the First Nations that are leading this project, and Goldcorp has provided the development dollars and expertise to help move the project along.
Wataynikaneyap project is in two phases right now. Phase one, a line going up from Basket Lake to Pickle Lake, which needs to be refurbished in order to connect the remote norths. And the phase two is connecting the remote communities.
The new line to Pickle Lake was identified as a priority project in Ontario's long-term energy plan. And phase two, at an estimated cost of $600 million, will deliver power from the new line in Pickle Lake to Musselwhite and all of the participating communities.
I don't think the general public understands how our communities and First Nations have to tolerate, this kind of system. But that's what we have now, but we have to live with that, I guess.
Ontario's 2013 long-term energy plan identified the grid connection of remote communities as a priority. Most remote First Nations communities are running at or near maximum power capacity, and this results in frequent and lengthy power outages.
Right now, our communities are limited as to what they can do. Some housing is still standing there without it being connected, and that's because they don't have enough power to be able to do it. There's business and economic opportunities that are on hold as a result because there's no room to be able to maneuver things around unless you swap power.
If you can't build additional houses, then that impacts the reserve because you don't have enough power to sustain those buildings.
We're trying to build an arena in North Caribou. They don't have enough power there. And also in other communities, we have, we're trying to build restaurants that'll, have sufficient power and stuff like that, and they don't. They don't have enough capacity to be able to hook them up and so forth. And even some homes that we can't even connect. And of course, there's failure. When the generators fail, we have to do a lot of planning, to try and get the community back up to par in relation to, the power that they lost and so forth. So it's gets very frustrating sometimes. So
one of the communities that we have engaged with as part of our community engagement, they tell us that. Actually, this was an elder who told us that she no longer tries to use any hot water to ensure that there is some available for the other members of the community. And I think that's very sad to hear because an elder conserving water for others when they should have these things available to them. The other part to that is when in one community we heard the story that when the power goes out, they have to bring in the elders from the seniors' residence into the nursing station where there's a backup generator. So for those people that are on dialysis or they require some other form of power for their health needs, so they have to bring them into the nursing station. Now that is a disruption to daily routine of elders. When the power goes out, they have to go into the nursing station. Now what we're hearing is that the backup generator has also failed. So it becomes a health issue.
What it boils down to is the need of our communities, each of our communities, and what happens when there's power outage. It comes to their health and safety. It comes to their basic needs such as food, shelter, water, because anything that is run by the energy is compromised when there's power outage.
We're heading for potential crisis if we don't, and it's not going to be just one community. And one of the things that why we do this is to avert this future crisis.
Potential leaks and spills also threaten to contaminate the lands and waters as millions of liters of fuel are delivered by truck over the winter road. As the winter road season shortens due to climate change, more and more fuel needs to be brought in via air, adding further to an already high cost. It is expected that the costs will only continue to rise. The Wataynikaneyap Power Project is a $1 billion project that will require significant investments from both the federal and provincial governments as well as other sources.
Well, right now it costs at least $68 million to provide diesel to get those generators operating in the communities. So that's one area that costs can be offset with the amount that is being put out for diesel generation. So that's one area. Plus also there'll be other sources of funding from government and as well as industry.
A financial feasibility study has provided a good business case for offsetting the $68 million currently spent annually on diesel generation. Wataynikaneyap Power is building a strong organization with confidence and expertise that will be attractive to investors. Initial input provided at the community engagement sessions recommended that a transmission route be selected specifically to reduce the impact on the natural environment and the homelands. The communities expect that the transmission line will follow existing and planned road corridors and will avoid high-use areas such as trapping and hunting areas, plus other community-identified value sites. Affected land users, harvesters, and families will continue to be engaged to ensure impacts are minimized.
The way it's been done has never worked. And our people know how it should be done.
The opportunity that this transmission line will bring to the north is limitless, really, in the economic and social benefits to the First Nations. They will have opportunities to be on par with the rest of the province. Right now, with their remote diesel generation, they're very limited to what they're able to do. And it's expensive, and it's not environmentally friendly. So I think if with the grid connection, what they believe that they can do, this will allow them to do it.
There's other spin-offs from the community themselves that may not necessarily be part of this project, but it'll help it because now that they have access to power, they'll be able to do some other opportunities, economic initiatives. A lot of communities right now, they have their economic development plans that they want to enact, but some of them are unable to due to some limitations.
We've been working hard, for the last few years, to try to get this project underway and so forth. And I think this is very, very good for our communities. This will offer a lot of opportunities for our people in relation to economic development, security, health, and safety for our communities.
The Wataynikaneyap Power Project is a great step towards creating employment and other opportunities for participating communities. There will be over 1,000 direct construction jobs and 60 long-term operation positions created in the north. As a member community, you will have ownership in an electrical power transmission company. Once connection to the grid is established, the door to a wide variety of economic development opportunities in your community will open, from small operations to larger business initiatives and much more. Before the completion of Phase 2, communities will have to decide on a distribution system. They can elect to remain with Hydro One Remote Communities Incorporated or establish a licensed community utility. They can also choose to work with other First Nations to set up a licensed regional distribution utility. This potential business opportunity could prove very beneficial to First Nations as we move forward with the project. Wataynikaneyap Power is structured specifically to be responsible to the people it serves. The organization is mandated to do what is in the best interests of the participating communities, and you are encouraged to learn about this project and make your opinions known. Your opinion does count.
Watay is doing a lot more than what would be expected to engage in the community. First of all, this is different from when we talk about consultation by government. We call it engaging the communities. And we go into the communities and make sure that we are making them aware of what the project is, what it is intended to do, and that we use that information that they provide to us, the input that they give us, to make the necessary changes. Like, for example, when we went in there with 3 options on the routing analysis that we did on potential routing for the transmission line, out of that came a 4th option based on what the community was saying. So yes, Watay is doing a lot more to ensure that the input provided by the communities is put into use.
You have to educate people because if they're not used to the way that new thing that you're bringing in operates, you have to educate them. And especially if it's going to be a community or a First Nation driven project. The more you educate people, the more you bring them in.
All of us have to exercise due diligence. And what I mean by that is, you can't say you haven't been consulted when maybe you did not take that responsibility to make sure that the people are informed of the project thoroughly. and accurately and whatever. So everyone must exercise due diligence, and we always call on the government to exercise due diligence in terms of consultation with people and whatnot. But I think our own people also must take on the responsibility of exercising their due diligence as leaders.
Ownership, creating opportunities, building unity, equity, and capacity are key to First Nation success. Wataynikaneyap Power's goal is to improve the quality of life of First Nations peoples and to maximize business and employment opportunities in First Nations communities.
It'll serve as a model for a type of infrastructure building in First Nation communities right across the country or even in other parts of the world. I think this is something huge that's happening when 18 communities agree and say, okay, well, let's build this transmission line.
This project to me is very exciting because I think for our First Nation people, I look at it from a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that we need to start looking at how are we going to control our destiny. And one of the ways to do it is to start creating equity within our own First Nation and controlling major infrastructure such as this. This is a $1 billion entity. And yes, we can't just look at dollar signs, but if we are going to start looking at changing the situations from social responsibilities that we have to our communities, the treaty obligations that we have with our First Nations, I think this is one project that we can say we should control, own, and we are able to create opportunities as a result of this huge project that we're undertaking.
Access to reliable electric power has become a requirement for everyday life. And no longer will remote First Nations communities be denied the same opportunities afforded to most Ontarians. Through this initiative, we will not only bring power to our remote First Nations, we will ensure that our people living in these remote communities are given the same access to power as those who live in urban centers. Wataynikaneyap Power won't just provide electrical power. Wataynikaneyap Power will give communities the power to succeed.
An elderly gentleman that came to me, what he told me is I was raised up on a sardine can with a wick in it or something, but there was a little kid in the corner over there who was playing his game. And I wanted to show him, that's his world, not yours.